Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the South Star Classroom. I believe we are on episode 176. My name is David Castillo, one of your co-hosts, and today we've got Dr. Cole joining us, as well as Omar Yanar. He's there somewhere.
Yeah, we have this
Just
room.
such a
We have
soul glow, baby.
this crystal
We
ball
got the
like
room.
chandelier light, but not him.
Yeah. And we have an exciting show for you today. Interesting topic. I think we'll definitely make some connections to what's happening in the political world now. But before we dive in, let's do some brief check-ins. Jubilee is out today, and so hopefully she'll be back next week. So we're wishing her well. She put on a stellar show last week.
That was a good
Quite eye-opening and invigorating for sure. Who would like to go first?
Well, since I'm in frame with you, I'll go ahead and go.
There you are.
Hell yeah.
It's good to hear everybody. And Omar, we can hear you just fine. We just don't see you.
Yeah, man, you're gonna see me in a moment.
Just didn't know if you knew your mic was hot or not. Didn't want to have a miss.
Well, I knew that mic was hot, baby, and I was singing that soul glow. Just let
I
it
got
shine through, girl.
He spiked the speakers and it skipped on him. But I'm doing well, man. I'm traveling for work. It's been pretty busy. I was traveling last week too. It's been but very blessed. So sad I missed last show because I would have enjoyed that topic. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. Thank you for picking this topic. I mean, being somebody who cut his teeth in Oakland and education there, community schools is a thing that I grew up around, and the concept of understanding. And I think there's gonna be some people hearing about these terms for the first time. So I'm looking forward to giving a good show.
Omar.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Jubilee, who we love, who we miss, and is gonna be hopefully joining us soon. But we had a hell of a show last week, and I hope everyone, if you didn't get a chance to tune in. As usual, man. Like I got this is fun news, everybody. So I in collaboration with an amazing group called Teaching Lab. Was part of a multi-million-dollar grant that Teaching Lab was awarded to work with us and 3 other school districts on the art of teacher coaching. So having administrators learn how to coach teachers, how to increase urgency, how to increase efficiency, how to increase performance in the classroom. I mean, it's just teacher education programs are not cutting it. They ain't cutting it. They ain't ever going to cut it. So much of the work has to be done there. And here's the irony of irony. I have been a WWE fan since I was a kid. And if everyone's like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, if you don't know, Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon, who was the head of the WWE until several sexual harassment and inappropriate and hush money lawsuits were brought against him. Linda McMahon, his wife, who has taken a stone cold stunner, is now the Secretary of Education. Guess what she did to my funding?
Well, I'm sure she got rid of it. Her job to
That's right.
To close the department.
So Linda McMahon has not only been stone cold stunned, she has stone cold stunned my funding. So that's what's going on in my life. So if those of y'all that are like, oh, hey, yeah, man, they're cleaning up things. I'm like, yeah, they're cleaning up the very things that are helping low-income students that directly impacted me. I was one of 4 schools in the country, ladies and gentlemen, that was getting that funding, and now that is gone. So Mr. Yanar has taken a stone cold stunner from the McMahon family.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Are you surprised? Did it come as a surprise to you, or like? I'm just curious. I'm curious as people are reacting to these things. And one, it sucks that you lost funding, but I'm just curious if people are surprised that these folks are doing exactly what they campaigned on and said. I just was curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone was a little surprised that this particular funding was cut because look, man, that's appropriations, man. Like that's Congress, right? So they made an executive act that they're going to get sued on because Am I surprised that Trump and the administration is doing this? No. Am I surprised that they're taking unilateral steps that are unconstitutional and against the judicial process and due process? A little, but as they're packing courts, that's what I think I'm really like sad about, is that they're trying to pack those courts. So when it does come to court, you got, unqualified Supreme Court justices like Kavanaugh and Amy Barron Cohen going to support this man. Although I was surprised to see Amy Barron Cohen go against him recently. So that was interesting. So no, in one respect, Doc, I'm not surprised. In the other respect, I'm surprised that they're that cavalier about this.
Okay.
And if that makes sense. Like, I knew it was coming, just not this soon.
Oh, well, I throw it back to David, but I'll just say as we do it, anybody else out there that's working and doing anything in our realm and anything community, we now cannot be surprised by anything else that happens. These people said what they're gonna do. They got they got all the power there, and people are gonna do lawsuits, but I think they are ready for those. But it's gonna be interesting. Again, elections have consequences. We have to run better candidates and run better strategy. I will say it over and over until people are sick of me. And people can't get mad at us, Omar, because we were saying it a year before this damn election.
Correct.
So back to you, David.
Word up,
Yeah.
man. Word up.
Yeah. Okay. So
Hey, how are you, brother?
today,
I'm gonna ask you how you were
just
doing.
check in. Yeah. Let's do the
Yeah,
check in.
man. Just hey, man. Are you alive? Are you
Oh, what
okay?
I'm glad you skipped the check-in, David. Jubilee ain't here. We ain't gotta do that.
I'm
Man,
good.
I
I'm doing
I don't
good,
get to
man.
talk to David often. I just want to hear he's all right.
Yeah, doing good, man. Work is good. Home life is good. Got to spend a little time last weekend socializing with some friends, going out in the town, doing our thing. Yeah, it was great. Got to connect with some old college buddies. Out there acting like we're still in college. But that's for the after show.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've been wanting to address this topic for a while, and we'll get into the topic here in a second. We are I've recently seen the topic come up again. And so kind of in the spirit of the new administration, and just all of the conversations about the federal Department of Education. And I think the existential question is we've talked about a number of different subtopics, but the question is what is the purpose of public education, right? And so today we are going to be talking about these don't exist everywhere. We'll talk about where they exist. But I think for you and I, Charles, we come out of Oakland, and that was kind of like ground zero for what's called the community schools movement, or the community schools model. And let me explain to you here briefly what it is.
Oh, you know what? You're right. Shit, I remember reading about that in grad school. You guys in Chicago were really ground zero for that. Wow, man, that's a throwback.
Well,
I remember all those
Oakland,
articles I read now.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Let's see if we can make this happen here. So this is what it looks like. This is a graphic. You can't see it. I got to get it up there. Okay. This is a graphic from the CDC. This is, I don't know how long this information is going to be up on the CDC website. They might take it down after today's show. Get that out of there.
Get that DEI website out of here.
I was surprised it was still here. I was
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, baby. We ain't calling it DEI anymore, man. We had that whole show last week.
Okay. So what this is it's a framework, and it's really about creating conditions within public schools to not just address the child, but also the entirety of the school and the whole community. So think about a school that is much larger and operates in many other areas outside of just instruction and academics, right? And so this is what it looks like. The role of the community in supporting the school connections, making the connection between health and academic achievement. Okay. And there are 10 components, and these are them. Physical activity being one of them. physical education and physical activity, a focus on nutrition, environment, and services. These are things that kind of already exist in most schools. I should be all schools. Health education, right? Health education, when I'll tell you what, when we were operating under No Child Left Behind, and when something had to get cut on instruction, we cut health education. You know, wasn't the right decision, but that's what happened. Now we're getting into also focusing on, and this predates COVID, right? With COVID and students coming back to school after COVID, you started to hear a lot about social emotional learning. Well, it's been around for a while, right? So social and emotional climate of the school and learning, the physical environment. What does the school look like physically? Is it an open, inviting, welcoming, exciting place like your East Side school, Omar, right? Like your new campus. I mean, the place is amazing. You think about the importance of like the actual facility, right? And the message that sends to like the community, to students, to your staff around, like it's a value statement. Let's keep going. Now we're talking about offering, I'm not talking about like academic counseling or college counseling, but like actual counseling, psychological services, and social services on the school site. These are things that are not typically available. Health services, not talking about a school nurse. We're talking about a community health clinic, right? Partnership
Indeed,
with a public or a private entity. Services for employee wellness. Other opportunities for community involvement, opening the school up for other nonprofit, community-based organizations to come in and partner, use the space, provide services, and then much deeper level of family engagement. So this is what it looks like, right? This is kind of like the graphic. So that's what it is. I'm going to pause there. And before we dive into some statistics, I would love to hear just like what your experience has been, what your awareness or your level of like knowledge around this concept of the community schools.
I can go and clear the deck and get out the way real quick. I would say,
Man, I want you to get in the way.
I think I was born in the way, trying to do something different.
I like it, man, because I don't need no move, get out the way. I want you in the way.
Thank you, Ludacris. I appreciate
By
you.
the way, yeah, that's right. This is the kind of riffraff that I enjoy on this show. Just a little bit of a diversion from all the seriousness.
We are aware, but I would say, I think community schools, I think they play a critical role in addressing systemic barriers that impact student achievement. I think that's really important to state, especially in like marginalized communities. But however, I do think that their success shouldn't only be measured by social services. They got to also demonstrate academic growth. And in my experience, that part was always forgotten, and it just wasn't there. And I'm talking about what I've witnessed and what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of this because ultimately, like what I've noticed in the models, both in Oakland and in Chicago, man, like it's got some community schools, and they've done this out in the Midwest. Is you're talking about really low income communities, man. So when you've got folks struggling to survive and they don't have the money to deal with healthcare, they don't have money to deal with dental issues, or they don't have money or resources to deal with these fixtures, we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So like a family's constantly in survival, like how are they going to focus on this work and schoolwork if they're always struggling to survive? And it's not just for the kids. The community school model does this work for the community. So then like a dad or a mom may be able to drop off their kid, and as they drop off the kid, they can hit the doctor's appointment, they can hit that dentist appointment, they can hit that clinic appointment, they can get psychological services, right? And then pop out, go to work, do their thing, or vice versa. They come a little early to pick up the kid, or better yet, I've seen models where they pick up the kid and the parent go together. So I'm a huge advocate of this work. And I think what happens is just first take. They are probably focused very much on getting this whole model to work, which is difficult in and of itself. But I think that look, man, I just got that funding taken away from me from Teaching Lab, specifically for how to teach teachers on how to be better, how to coach teachers and how to do better. If Teaching Lab is doing this work, it means that this is a difficulty and a crisis across the board. So yeah, man, like we need resources on how to improve academics. We need resources on how to improve teacher effectiveness as well. It shouldn't just be about the wraparound services, but I'm a both and kind of guy, and I think both should exist.
Both and is key. Let me let me pull up a tweet that kind of led me to put this concept forward. So I think you all know this particular gentleman. These are some of the folks that were, you know, we've sat at table with people like this. And there are many others, you know, during the education reform years. And then now all of a sudden, like everybody's on the MAGA train, right? Which, you know, it is what it is. But I think there's actually some interesting value to what he's saying here. So this is I don't even know how to say his last name. Robert Pondisco.
Pondisio.
All right. You know what? You're Italian. It's an Italian name. Change it to like Pondisc. You know, you need to Americanize. You need to assimilate. I cannot pronounce your last name, dude.
Take that.
Going back to last week's show. The problem with community schools isn't that impulse to provide mental health or other services. It's placing those services in the community's lowest functioning institution, which he's saying are public schools, giving them tacit permission to de-emphasize their primary function, teaching and learning. You know, I can't say I disagree with that statement. However, I think it also is kind of like what Omar was saying. It's that either or mindset, right? That binary mindset of, you know, schools should only be about this. They shouldn't be about this. Well, what if there was a world where we could actually have, you know, community schools and have some accountability around it, right? Like if you're going to have funding for community schools and to provide all these services, like we need to be able to measure impact. And if you can't measure impact, then you can only measure meals served, teeth cleaned, sessions with counselors or psychologists. You're not really measuring impact. You're measuring, you know, how you're using your money, but it doesn't mean that anything positive is happening out of it. It's interesting to when you go scroll down, you know, some of the comments here are just kind of wild. Let's see. I would invite anyone who thinks co-locating unrelated services in schools is a good idea. See, I don't think these services are unrelated.
Well, they're not unrelated. Right? But I mean, not to jump in, man.
Go ahead.
PhD. You got to play a hated degree.
What is the saying? Even a steak. I mean, even a garbage can gets a steak. I think that. Look, man. I'm not going to disrespect Robert Pondisio. We don't see eye to eye. I've never had any run-ins with him personally. I know cats on the A Black Hands. They constantly had run-ins. He kind of stayed away from me. I appreciate that. I'm not mad at it. But the thing is that even though I agree with a large part of what he was initially saying, I also know what his intentions are and who he's dog whistling to. So, I mean, I'm going to channel our girl since she's not here in Jubilee. I think with Pondisio, man, I think anything that shows damage to the armor around some of these things, he's going to kind of, he put out a cogent statement, but he knew who it was going to call in and tag in and what they were going to do. So he doesn't have to say the crazy racist or wild stuff.
So here we go.
He gets to be like, I don't talk like that. I don't do that.
Like circumventing parents is also a problem. Whoever says in this model that we're circumventing parents, you're actually like
they don't know
engaging parents at a much deeper level. Like anyways,
well, I'll tell you, but this is the cultural time that we're in. What they're doing is they're confounding the gay and trans rights and sex change issues that people ran on and were outraged by. And they are mentally putting you insane without saying, oh, these community woke schools are those schools that if your kid goes there and wants to chop something off, they don't have to tell you and they don't have to talk to you. And I think that
Exactly.
that message did capture a lot of America, and not everybody's a bigot, but it captured and it scared people. So
Yeah.
strategically, if I can, when you say community schools, if I can make you think of that, I've done my job. It's a reason why he's a fellow at AEI and he's been there for a while and he's thriving because he's
Yeah.
very, very good at what he does. So
Yeah.
I think Robert is a smart man,
Oh yeah.
but I think at times the way he goes about his business is vile in the sense
Yeah.
that he knew what he was laying landmines for, and everybody's gonna walk into him, black, white, and
Yeah.
otherwise.
And now we're walking through the smoke, clearing the smoke to see what's still here.
Right.
It's reasonable to say that students are in need of these types of services, of course, and also reasonable to say that providing them in the most convenient way is the best solution. Hello, but it does potentially split the focus of the school. Good comment. Good comment.
Mhm.
I mean,
I
we
get
could
it.
keep going down. We could keep going. And they're like, this should be a giant red flag after COVID. And this is the website we were looking at.
Mhm.
Right.
All right, we're gonna. So get.
Oh,
I love how, I mean, you can kind of see, like, there's this
The
world of
internet
like
strikes
reality and funding and programs and what the government's going to fund, what school districts want to adopt. And then there's this whole world of, like what Charles said, of the dog whistling and the social media stuff. And man, it changes from day to day. Like, it comes
Yeah, but
by
that's
one day. These things have a 48-hour
big world.
lifespan. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
No, but that's a
exactly.
big world. But what I'm saying is that, like, these cats, this is their job, is to intentionally look and figure out a way of creating reasonable doubt while sounding rational.
Mhm.
So this is the Kid Rock statement that I was making last week, is that, like, to the
Yep.
normal observer, Kid Rock sounded like quite rational, but he was dog whistling and using false rationality in order to create a false equivalent and a false conclusion. That's a fancy way of saying they are very good at talking shit in the right
Yep.
way that's going to make people doubt a otherwise very effective program, to not only make those folks who already agree with this shit feel good, but maybe turn a couple heads to be like, well, like, Kid Rock's reasonable, or this Peleschini guy, the Parmigiana guy, the chicken Parmigiana guy. That's just me.
I heard Kid Rock's got a new partner, new girlfriend. Should look that up.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know
are they?
what that brand name is.
Yeah, I
but-
mean, are they trans?
No.
I would doubt
You-
that.
you-
No,
you
he's turning
look
the
it up.
corner.
You look it up.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
down with
okay,
that
okay.
because but yes, buy with the buy. Continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
we're going to
that's
jump
it.
into the
It's just
first
like-
question, but
That's some nefarious shit.
laying the foundation. Okay. In 2020, a Rand Corporation study found that in some community schools across the country, there were some gains in things like graduation and attendance, right? Positive.
Yeah.
However, the impact around like standardized test scores was still very mixed, basically inconclusive. Okay, that is what it is. We just saw, and we're not going to do a deep dive, but we just saw the recent National Assessment of Educational Progress scores come out, the NAEP, and long story short, students that fell behind during the pandemic and that were behind before the pandemic continue to fall behind. I think that's a fair headline. So the question is, like, are community schools truly, I mean, are they a mechanism to improve academic achievement, or is it mission creep from core instruction?
Yeah, man. That's a good ass question.
Look, I'll say, these schools should be judged by their ability to create environments where students, they can both thrive socially, but also excel academically. So, I don't think one should come at the expense of the others. And I think when you look at the NAEP data, NAEP data was still, it declined. It was still fairly low, but, you got the COVID X factor there. So I won't put too much weight on that at the moment. But just like, you got to balance these things. Like, if you highlight wraparound services like mental health support, nutrition, family engagement, all that stuff is like really essential for learning, and it has to be woven in. Like if we're trying to build this environment to thrive mentally and socially, like there has to, you cannot, I feel like sometimes when we were doing this work or we would hear it, like academics did get put on the back burner, and it gives fuel to the Pondicios and the Pondicio camp. And you got to be on top of that. Because again, whether I agree with the man or not, or like the man or not, facts are still facts. And our kids can't continue like to lose this stuff. And you know, I think there are some examples, and I think that when you find examples of places doing both, or where when it showed causality of if these things were implemented, that directly led to these kids achieving more academically and socially. If there are those cases, then you have to really shine lights on those cases, and you have to do it in a way that's middle of the road. What do I mean? You have to do it in a way, I think that things are about to shift. And what I mean is, I don't know if far right and far left, I don't know if those voices are going to continue to permeate the way that they have been. I think that when you start to see these changes happen, I think people are kind to try to grip and grab the moderate, the middle again. And so I think that when you talk about these schools, make sure you talk about the academic achievement. And if it isn't where it needs to, make sure at least that you are addressing that and that you are showing some concern there. Because I can much easier stomach that we're not there yet, but we believe that these bets will get us closer to that. And here's the evidence of that. And by this date, check us and see. So, you know, not to take up all the air, David, but I've just dealt with these for a while. And I used to say this in these meetings. And people would look at me like I was crazy. And now look who we are.
Exactly. So I'm going to pin your comment on this date, check us, but I want to hear what Omar has to say.
I mean, look, Dan, I think this comment is, I mean, rather than use the F word, man, I'm just going to use pinchy as a good Mexican. Man, pinchy garbage. Like this Richard guy can go fucking take a walk, dude, and this stack can go take a walk. You're talking about, like, how do people not know statistics, man? 2022. We are coming right off of COVID. Community schools are in the most low-income areas in the country. Low-income kids had the greatest declines academically in the country because their parents were working. They didn't have mom able to teach them at home. They didn't have the pods that all these other kids did. And those kids had their scores decline too. So you're focusing on scores that, A, have already been demonstrated to have been universal across the board for just about every kid in every demographic in the United States. But if you knew your things well, the low-income community got hit the most. So you cherry-picked a statistic out of 2022 to demonstrate that this thing doesn't work. This is some bullshit, dude. So you went in, said, here's a low-income school, this community thing to get them into a state where they're getting medical services and clinical services and psychological services, things that low-income communities have often gone completely without, because healthcare in the United States is also completely garbage and completely benefiting those of middle, upper middle, and high income classes, where the low income kids are walking around with like missing arms because they can't afford healthcare. And then you use that, you weaponize that to say we should get rid of community schools. Like, how fucking dare you, dude? That's some bullshit.
I agree, but I think we're making a grave mistake. And David, join us as you can sit back and watch this. I think
I'm good. I'm collecting data right now. Go ahead.
Because I agree with you, Omar, but I think you're doing exactly what Pondicio wants you to do. He wants you to take the emotional counter. He wants you to like kind of go into the thing and make it personal and about him and his ilk. And what he will come back and say is, but where was I wrong statistically? Where was I wrong in the academic achievement?
Yeah.
And it makes us look like we only are there on the emotional side. And what he would also probably say is, look at, judging by you three men, one of you that has a child, none of the three of you would leave your child in that type of environment if you saw no form or no type of academic improvement. So what I say is, I agree with everything you're saying, Omar, but what I would also look at is like, where can we find in the data? There's a different story in the data, and we got to tell it with that data. And then we also
I
have
would
to
agree with
push.
you.
But no, I agree with you too. That's what I'm saying. I think what I'm saying is I've met leaders that lead these schools, and they're not Omar Yanar. They're not. They're not overly concerned with the academic piece. When David and I won't throw you in there, David, but when we would go and like do reviews on schools or things like that, or trying to check in on them, and charter or traditional, and we start getting to the academics, they try. Some of them did act like it was an afterthought, like it didn't matter, like it was this other thing. But we're
Well, you
doing
can throw me
this.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're doing this. So I 1000% agree with you, but I know your heart and I know where you're coming from. And I know how much of a stickler you are for academic achievement. And I know your own
Yeah.
story. You know what I'm saying? But I think that in these, but Pondicio is smart, bro. I've dealt with this cat. I've seen people deal with him. He builds these traps and he's going to clip that part. And it's going to be like this unhinged person. It's like, no, man, that's an Ivy League graduate who runs an incredible school who is teaching people that came from where he comes from in a way that they haven't been taught before. So I think that we have to find a better way. These things are not mutually exclusive. And I wrote about this in my book. Like, you got to find a way to meld the two and talk about them as one in a scientific way. And that way people can't box us in. But I agree with everything you said, though.
I want to be clear. When I said you can include me, I meant include me in the group of people that will not allow people to shy away from academic
outcomes.
Outcomes.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I mean, and we both have talked shit from higher ups about that, like from our own side of things. So that's why I was making sure. Yeah. I just been through this before. That's what I meant. So
no, yeah. Look, the three of us all agree on this premise. I think what's nefarious is that why'd you use 2022? So let's say this community school existed in 2015. I would have loved to see the data from 2015 to 2019. So if Richard came at me or whatever this dude is like, Omar, your school's not doing so well right now. I'm like, yeah, because I'm dealing still with the ramifications of COVID. I'm dealing with the intense difficulty that every low-income school is dealing with. I got 90% emerging bilingual kids trying to figure out both English and their lives. And like, that's a false statistic. But if you looked at my data in 2019 before COVID, man, we were ranked #1. So what I would ask to align yourselves with the academic component is my first question would be, cool, how long has the school existed? How their data looked before COVID? How their data looked before COVID? And then I would ask him, hey, show me your son's school or your daughter's school. Let me see their 2022 data compared to 2019.
They don't.
And if you get that data, then shut the fuck up.
So let's it feels like we're moving into solutions. So and maybe I have blinders on here, but it looks like California is like the state with the largest and most robustly funded community schools programs. We're talking about billions of dollars for what's called the California Community Schools Partnership Program, which is only growing. New York has a smaller program for sure, much smaller, but you have states like Illinois, Vermont, even Kentucky, Hawaii, Indiana, Missouri, Florida, Idaho, and even North Carolina that are kind of on the early spectrum of moving into some of this work. So it seems to be a growing concept. And so I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad thing, but my next question to you both, and you've kind of touched on it, or at least it feels like we're at this point in the show, is like, okay, so then how should we measure the effectiveness of, if we are going to be investing billions and millions of dollars into these programs, like outside of, we can all agree that standardized testing is a part of it, but what other things should we be measuring to say that, and this is very interesting, this is coming in at the time of Doge, right? Tell me 5 things that you did last week to make your community school better. I mean, how should we be measuring the effectiveness of these types of programs?
Well, I mean, go ahead, Doc. Go ahead, Al.
I mean, I think we're all aligned with, like, we want to make sure the goal overall of these community schools, to answer the Richards of the world and everybody else, is to improve academic performance, because what you're essentially doing is trying to mitigate the survival mode of a lot of these kids and parents having to deal with circumstances like medical issues, dental issues. It's again, it's just Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So I think the first things that you start looking at are like, if you're dealing with psychological service and medical service, are you seeing upticks in attendance? Are you seeing
Mhm.
downscaling in time spent off? Are you seeing lower detentions, lower suspensions, lower out of
Mhm.
school suspensions? I think those are your first data marks, because time outside of school greatly impacts the learning of every child. We all know that, right? I think what you really need to start looking at then is ultimately the long-term trajectory. So yeah, man, I want to look at reading scores, I want to look at math scores, but I'd love to see a long-term trajectory of a child who started maybe in middle school, graduated from high school, has had these services, and what's the trajectory of that child after high school? Is there a greater propensity for a job? Is there a greater propensity for post-secondary education? Is there a greater
Mhm.
demonstration of life success? Because yeah, you can take and encapsulate a 3-year trajectory of literacy scores and be like, this is failing. But dude, yo, man, like Rome isn't built in a day. We've got to look at a long-term trajectory. And look, I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't know personally anyone who runs a community school. Unfortunately, I never got to visit, whereas I think you gentlemen have had real personal experience with this. But I think you've got to have a both and, in that, look, if you're going to have the community school run all these programs, the overall goal must be to demonstrate incredible academic success, because
Mhm.
otherwise people are going to come after you and debilitate your funding and saying it doesn't work. So I'm all for the academic measures, but like, dude, there got to be some measures to be like, is there a longer lifespan of some of these parents? How about a longer longevity of these kids? How about like lower risk of disease, or even just like lower levels of disease, right? The attendance thing factors that in. It's like, hey, man, like kid's out for 2 weeks. Well, in
Yep.
this case, the kid was only out 3 days. I think those things need to be looked at, man, because people are going to be like, that's not the job of the school, but the health directly impacts the school. And the people that decide that these factors are not interrelated and correlated,
Yep.
they're just blowing bullshit, because they know it is. Because, like, for their
Mm.
kids, they're taking their kids to the doctor, they're making sure their kids are going to school. Like, come on now, if this is the other shoe, and people are like, would you send your kid here? I'd be like, would you let your kid deal with the flu without seeing the doctor for 2 weeks because you can't afford the bill? Okay, sit
Yeah.
out for 2 weeks, see what happens.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from a strategy standpoint because I really want these to succeed and survive and thrive. You asked for five metrics, right? So I had
No,
a
I
few.
was I was I was I was joking about
I
the
put five
doji,
The
together.
but
Doge.
So
Yeah,
I
okay.
had
put
Yeah.
more.
he got
I
five
had
on it.
more. But I
He got
listen.
five on
We're
it.
listen. We are like, I know we saying it in jest, but I actually do want to. Let me give you here's what I want.
Mhm.
One, start with academic growth and mastery. Like, are they proficient? Are we actually not just getting kids proficient, but what does mastery actually look like? If you're doing all this social emotional stuff and you see a spike in mastery, I think that's a very strong statistic, and it can be you can look at it across different types of schools, and you can compare it. You can have an apples to apples conversation. Two, Dr. Cole would say student agency and self-efficacy. Find a way to
Mm.
measure how, like, the critical thinking, how much I can do on my own. Do I know what's right for me, what's not right for me? Like, you're talking about what Omar's talking about, which I think Omar was hitting on something, but that was more of a longitudinal thing. If you're talking about diseases and long-term effects over time, that's going to be much more difficult to prove, and you need like something different. But in the right now, there can be metrics in ways. Work with a psychologist, work with a sociologist, or whatever. But what are the factors that we can test and show about student agency and self efficacy? Three, I would also say, it's not longitudinal, but it sets up for longitudinal success is post-secondary readiness, right? Don't track graduation rates, but also track enrollment, college enrollment, and
Mhm.
college graduation, which is has some longitudinal pieces to it, but I think that's important because it's easy to get kids into school. It's not easy to get them through school. I would also add, like, under that moniker would be, what does career preparedness look like? Maybe it is one of those kids that want to go to a 2-year, or don't want to go to college, or want to go to the military, but how do we measure their career preparedness? And you can do that by, as we're doing this longitudinal stuff, what are the starting salaries as they matriculate into their jobs? What are their salaries 10 years from now look like versus kids that did not have that type of access? For engagement and attendance, we know we have so much research
Mhm.
that directly points to chronic absenteeism and the long-term impacts on that child's success going into adulthood. Like, you can almost predict certain things by who's chronically absent and who's not. And then I would say, finally, for Omar, but more so for Jubilee, is the social emotional development and well-being. What are the things that we're going to measure that kind of fill out that box? If all these had dials, how do we get them all green? So in that social emotional piece, you're looking at a student's emotional resilience, right? Like, their emotional intelligence, their interpersonal skills, and their overall well-being. And I would argue that this is almost as important as number one, but it's very top tier because we are in a time and society where young people in our society are losing more of their interpersonal social skills. Like, boys do not know how to go up and talk to girls in person. People do not know how to interact with each other.
Bro, people don't know how to talk. They're
But
texting each other and they're sitting at the same table.
But it is being exacerbated by social media. It's being exacerbated by this new culture that we're in and that we're embarking on. Those 5 things, though, if I'm running a school like this, those are the things that I want to know, and that's the data I want to have. And then once you get a baseline, I don't even care if the baseline sucks. At least you have a starting point. At least you have a common language. Again, people hate when David and I like give Bush's props for actually, like de-aggregating data around who's struggling. But I think this is where it comes into play. Like, this is the place where it's like, yo, what is the common language, the common metrics? So school A is being measured on this, and school B is being measured on fucking butterflies in their line. Like, no. Like, we have to have something so we can compare. And I know people don't like competition, but in everything in life worth fucking having, like, there is something that tells you if you are up to standing. And so that would be my 5 things. I had to cut down a few. You see, I consolidated a few. I had 8.
Yeah, you did.
I consolidated a few. So,
we used to measure butterflies at the Montessori school in Oakland. So I won't hold that against you, and I hope you won't hold it against me either.
I got you. I got you.
So in terms of measurement, I would definitely start with academic outcomes. We talked about a whole bunch of different ones in between, state testing, local assessments, formative assessments, looking at NAEP scores, looking at graduation, not dropout, but push out rates. Even looking at like grade progression and course completion, looking at all of those things, because that's really, that is still, in my mind, the gold standard for, like, is this working, right? And we still haven't seen, we've yet to see, like, and I agree, I think the timing, I don't know about the timing of when the data was collected for the 2020 RAND study, but, obviously, that was not a good time to be measuring the effectiveness of any kind of school system. I think something very core and basic, especially coming out of COVID, is, attendance. There are systems that, many systems are still trying to get students back into school, at a regular 90 to 92% rate, as opposed to, like, some schools are like 75, 80. And if kids aren't showing up, they can't access learning. They can't access any of the other services. I think tracking social, emotional, and mental health indicators matters. Like, surveys are very powerful at the high level. I think, students should be surveyed a minimum of twice a year around their mental health. In California, we have the Healthy Kids Survey. Other states have their own. But the survey data is only effective if it stays in Austin or Sacramento or Albany, wherever that is. It's not going to help anyone. Our states have to be able to figure out how to get that data down to the district level and to the school level. And then leaders have to be able to like unpack that data with their staff. Otherwise, it's not going to help kids. One thing that wasn't necessarily mentioned, if these services are going to be provided within the context of schools, are we boosting parent and community engagement? And how does community feel about these services? So also surveying parents about, you know, their experience in accessing these services at the school site, right? Or
if parent volunteering goes up, that's a really good one.
Exactly. All those things. And then I think long-term student success, you guys touched on that, so I won't touch on that. But one other thing I want to focus on, and you mentioned it earlier, Omar, you said it's not the job of the school, but if the school is going to take on these services, then it is the job of the school, right? And so measuring health outcomes for students and community, also measuring crime data in the community. If you have a community school, more students are supposed to be showing up, engaging in schoolwork. We know that when students are engaged in school, they're less likely to go home and commit crimes because their minds are thinking about the future. And so there should be some kind of impact around lowering neighborhood community crime for sure. Otherwise, something's not working there. I don't care about the reading scores or the math scores, but if crime in the community in DP Stokeland is off the charts and we're funding these schools, there's something that's not working, right? And so those are my quick thoughts. I don't know how these schools are measuring their effectiveness now, but I think we put out some good ideas.
I mean, I like the crime statistics, man. Like, for sure, that's a huge one. I mean, if you look at crime statistics, man, like you've seen them, dude. It's like the spike is 13 to 17-year-olds. The spike is 13 to 17-year-old males. The spike is from 3 o'clock, 3:30 to about 5:30. I like it, man. It's like it's the most obvious statistical analysis I think anyone's ever seen. And I thought that was such a really good point about talking about crime statistics, because ultimately, like, that will demonstrate whether or not like these kids have a future or not. Because again, yeah, man, like, hey, I know a lot of kids that are in upper middle, upper class realities that are doing horrific things between those hours, doing horrific drug related things at their private schools. But because mom and dad got lawyers and that's a private school, like, no one's going to prosecute. Meanwhile, our kids going into the jail system, man. That's what Nixon and Reagan decided to set up. So I think that was a really good one, man. We're almost at closing arguments, aren't we?
We are. I want to throw in one more wrench. So, you know, most of these programs or state programs are funded by a combination of federal and state and like philanthropic dollars, right? Especially in California. We think about, you know, the Trump administration and accountability and like where their head is around accountability in public schools. I don't know if you all saw this, but I'm going to put this up here. There's something called the long-term trend exam for 17-year-olds, which is like kind of the last attempt to assess high schoolers' preparedness for college, post high school readiness, and Trump just canceled it. So, you know, I don't know what this tells us about this conversation. We're like, are we measuring? Are we not measuring? You know, what should we be measuring? Did you all see this?
No, man, I didn't see that. I see this. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I love it.
So it's interesting times that we're living in, but we can transition into closing thoughts to see what y'all have to say about this this topic.
Yeah, man. I mean, to address the whole Trump thing, I think it's just obvious. I think any kind of like accountability is going out the window, but I think that accountability is also like, hey, we ain't going to be accountable for handling special education anymore. We ain't going to be accountable for handling college loans anymore. We ain't going to be accountable for helping out with all these really great programs anymore. We're just going to allow states to shut shit down if they don't agree with it, and start seeing the greater level of privatization. And here's like my beef, man. The audacity to sit here and look at these comparative scores for these community schools. I'd like to see where your kids are at. Hey, all you commentators, all you folks who got private school education or whatever it may be, I want to see your 2019 scores compared to your 2022 scores in your rich schools, in your upper middle income schools, in your middle income schools. Show me those. So the fact that they're targeting this community school situation, once again, and I think Doc put it really well, it is a deeply intentional and purpose driven comment to speak to a very certain political contingency in order to make the lives of low income people even worse. And a better effort to privatize education and a better effort to see like this is where your tax dollars are going. I'm like, show me your scores in your schools. How well did you guys do after COVID? Talk to me about educating your kids when they were at home dealing with COVID. Did you hire tutors? Oh, you had money to hire tutors. Did you get into a pod and hire someone really special to do that? Probably. So I think that this is an attack that is disingenuous, that is lazy, and that basically no one has done any critical thinking on, because the critical thought is you showed me stats on these community schools. Show me the other stats of all the other schools that did so well after COVID, and then justify their extraordinary funding. Or how about one of those schools in Texas that just spent, I don't know, 35 million on a football program? Show me their academic scores. Show me how well they did. Show me how well they did after you spent $35 million on a football stadium. Like, that's what I want to see. So for our audience and for our listeners, man, like my final thoughts are simple. You're going to come at us with bullshit stats. Show me stats of your kids and justify the fact that this is only happening in those schools.
There you go.
I think mine is I agree with everything that Omar said. The only thing I would add is my work in these schools was in that time period. I don't know if you want to bet any significant amount of money on what that data looks like, because it's not good. It really wasn't good. It got worse and exacerbated by COVID, but it wasn't good to start with. I think I lean on the history of my people. I think any group can lean on the history of their people. I'm leaning on mine because I'm Black, but I think brown folks can lean on brown, Asian folks can lean on Asian. Like, everybody, communities have to own their educational outcomes for their kids. They have to be the ones that's demanding the quality. They have to be the ones that say, I'm not going to stand for this. They got to be the ones that's bum rushing those schools. The same way people get upset when their favorite team loses or gets cheated by the refs, or somebody loses their job that they or whatever, or the energy that we got for like a Target. You need to have that for like the entity that controls your kid's brain and is responsible for making sure that they're getting what they need. I don't need a Robert Pondicio. I don't need a Donald Trump. I don't need a Republican overlord to come and tell me certain things where I have to agree or disagree with them. Fuck them. I don't care about them. I'm not gonna dismiss what they're saying if it's true because I don't like them, even though I know the dog whistle behind it. I don't need somebody outside of my home to tell me it's time for me to clean up my house. I think we have to clean up our house, and I don't want to hear that we can't, because we have a legacy of people that were enslaved that were still educating their kids at the risk of losing a penny. And right after slavery, put their pennies together that had significantly less wealth than us to build independent schools. I think that, like, if the community owns the school, fuck the local taxes. If the community is owning the school, if David Castillo and I are in the same community And we are building what might start as a pod, but grows into this thing that's minus. We're gonna have standards of practice that let us know if we're doing well or not. And we're more concerned with fighting this other side than nurturing our own children. And I think that has to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think I'm with you on that. I mean, I think and this is pre-COVID, pre-community schools, like anything that we ever did at any of the schools that I was ever part of, any kind of program changes, additions, subtractions, shifts, we always were very mindful of measuring impact to students. And at that point, we were pretty much laser focused on academic outcomes. And so I think, I've always been about that. I know we've always been about that here on the show and the work that we do. So I do think it's a mistake for the community schools coalition, whether it be in California, New York, or the national coalition, to overemphasize the services that are provided without linking those services and that funding for those services to improved academic outcomes for children. So I don't think it's either or. I don't think we solely focus on the standardized test data. I don't think we solely focus on the number of teeth cleaned or the number of counseling visits or the number of, food bags that have been given out, at whatever. I think all those things are important. But again, if you're taking federal, state, local money, we have to be able to have some kind of proof point to say, like, yes, it's benefiting young people, it's benefiting the community, and here is the data. And if it's not, that's fine. But then you have to figure out what you need to shift in order to get those particular outcomes. But, I think we've seen it many times, Charles, and it's happening across the country where we see millions and millions of dollars going into school systems to fund schools and build programs at schools that are literally declining in enrollment to like sub 100, 75 kids. And you have all of these services that are there for and on any given day, only 50 of them are showing up in a building that was designed to, house or educate 500 kids. I think that's where I put on my efficiency hat. I'm like, this is not very efficient. We can't keep doing that. And that's kind of, that's my quick take on it. Thank you both for engaging in this conversation. I think it's a timely one with all the talk about government efficiency, right? We can have our own conversation about it here.
With that, man. Right. Thank you so much, David.
Well, show, man. Good show, man.
We'll see everybody next week on the Southstar Classroom. Yep.
Yeah. I might be traveling again. I got to double check. We might both be traveling, Dave. I got to check the dates. I got to look.
Yeah. I'll be here. I'll be here. I'm traveling Wednesday, but we'll get into that.
Oh, okay. I think I might, because I think I might be having to go in before you. But anyway, we will see you all next time. Same bad time, same bad station. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. This is the Southstar Classroom. Class is dismissed. Hold on. Let me get rid of this video. Okay. Now we're just going to close it out. Class is dismissed.